Let's talk about plant families. We group plants according to similar characteristics. We've mentioned this a little bit throughout the semester, and we'll go through it in a little bit more detail now. If you do go out for a walk, notice the red buds. They have a magenta flower that is blooming now. It's end of March. I've also seen it on the press conference that Fresno's mayor had at his own house. So it's a pretty common plant, blooms early, and it gives us a nice colorful display in the springtime. So plant families are grouped by their flower and fruit characteristics, by their reproductive traits. And scientists have been grouping plants by these characters for a couple hundred years. And with the advances in DNA in the last about 30 to 40 years, that has confirmed most of the original classifications of plants. There's been some adjustments, but mostly it's remained fairly similar. I'd like for you to be able to put a vegetable crop into its family. The reason we want to know the families of different vegetable crops is it can help us with pest control, and it can help us with other cultivation practices. For example, I came across a crop that was new to me called a chocha, and I knew from the write-up that it was in the cucurbit family, and even though there wasn't much of a description like we see in Johnny's seed catalog, I knew to treat it like a cucumber or melon, and it is tasty. It makes a little tasty cucumber fruit, but doesn't look like a cucumber. We're going to talk about dicots first. So remember, dicots have two cotyledons. These plants we are talking about today are mostly in the angiosperms. Yes, I think everything's in the angiosperms, which means flowering plant. So angiosperms have flowers. They're not always what we think of as a flower. For example, grasses do have flowers. We don't usually think about them. All right, legumes. So the first plant family that we're going to talk about are the legumes, and these are hugely important in human nutrition because they have a high level of protein in the seeds. Almost every indigenous culture has some legume in their diet. It's not always the seed, sometimes it's the root. So here you see the flowers of different legumes. You see the wisteria here. We have some of that at the garden plot that you've probably seen. Lupin is a gorgeous wildflower, and then sweet pea is very nice this time of year with nice fragrance. So I'd like for you to be familiar with the importance of legumes and be able to describe the fruit and the seed pod, and to be able to recognize it. If you were to see a new legume plant that you had not seen before, you go, well, that kind of reminds me of a legume, right? Provide protein to humans. So if you are now purchasing foods that could last a long time in your pantry, beans are one of those things that are good. Beans and dried peas we can store for a length of time in the pantry and are good for these conditions where we can't go out very much. And so we'll talk a minute about how to cook them. But legumes provide protein to humans and to our livestock as well. So they are in the plant kingdom. They are angiosperms. They are dicots. The order is Fabales, family Fabiaceae, and then there are many, many subfamilies and tribes. Here we're looking at the genus Lens. These are lentils, Lens culinaris. So this is a lentil that we eat, and it's called lens because the seed is lens shaped. It's convex on both sides. So these are actually quite good for our current conditions. They don't take as long to cook as some other beans. So you could rinse them, soak them, and then cook them in less than an hour You could probably soak them for an hour or two. You don't have to soak them overnight. So if you're going to eat these, you'd take this, take your lentils out of the bag, spread them out on a dish or cookie sheet, and check for little gravels or you know, peas, something that should not be in there. Just do a quick check for that. Make sure there's no insects in there. Rinse them. Most of these lentils you could cook in an hour. If you wanted to soak them for an hour beforehand, you could. And then you can either eat them in a soup, you could make a hummus-like thing with them, you could refry them, you could pretty much treat them like any other bean. Yeah, and you can make like a sandwich spread with them. All right. So they are the third largest group of flowering plants, 18,000 species in 650 genera. And they are distributed throughout the world and grow in a lot of different environments. So it's divided up into the Caesalpinia, which will flower here in the summer, 2,800 species. This is a lot of species. Mimosa, Mimosae, also almost 3,000 species. So these are small trees found in up to temperate regions. They'll grow in the southern part of the United States. And that includes the acacias. All right. The Fabiaceae are what we think of as the beans and peas, and widely used in human nutrition, 12,000 species. All right. Leaves are usually alternate and compound, meaning that there's several leaflets on one leaf. Flowers are 5 fused sepals and 5 free petals, often pollinated by insects. The fruit dehisces, which means that it opens on a seam on 2 sides. So think of a pea pod or a bean pod with a seam down each side, and it splits open there. So dehisce means to open on a seam, and the seeds are inside that pod, so the pod is considered to be the fruit. So here we see some green beans. These are just regular green beans or string beans, and you can sort of make out the seam on one side, but I think y'all are all familiar with string beans. And then there is the pea flower, right? So it looks similar to a bean flower or to a sweet pea flower. All right, that's the end of mini lecture 1. We'll have another mini lecture starting up on plant families.